I'm kicking myself that I didn't see this earlier, but I was just sitting and thinking about lobbyists lobbying for controls and thought about the incentives of good controllers and bad controllers. Bad controllers would be firms that are just trying to shut out competitors and cartelize the market. They lobby senators in order to do so. Standard rent-seeking stuff. Good controllers would be the well-intentioned busybodies. They lobby Congress to impose controls that they think will benefit society or something. They have good intentions. Note, I didn't say good controls. I said good controllers. I just mean that the controls were paved with good intentions. Even if the controllers were angels, you still have the calculation problem that is at the core of central planning. So even if they meant well, that doesn't mean they're going to do well. But anyway, given how large industry is, and how much large firms have to profit, and given how small the nonprofit sector is compared to companies that have to benefit from favorable regulation, it seems obvious that most regulation will be crafted in order to cartelize the market, not to benefit people, not even with the intent to benefit people. Furthermore, big business has a narrower focus. They want specific controls imposed. The activist groups have a more fluffy, protect the environment or keep out dangerous materials views. For example, when General Motors lobbied to require cars to have catalytic converters, they did that, and the Japanese cars didn't have catalytic converters. But the Japanese companies met emission standards by just having more efficient engines. They didn't need catalytic converters, but GM wanted to specifically require cars to have catalytic converters because they knew that the Japanese companies would have to refit all of their cars. Furthermore, big business is interested in the bottom line, while activists and other good controllers are prone to just satisfying their egos. Whereas lobbyists aren't interested, whereas big business lobbyists aren't interested in being known as a caring and wonderful person. In fact, they'd be happiest if you didn't know about them at all. And lastly, the good controllers can be convinced to support controls that are just meant to cartelize the market. They can be, activists can be dupes for corporations, whereas corporations are highly unlikely to be dupes for activists because what they want is rather specific and has to do with their production processes and keeping out competitors that way. So what am I talking about? Well, there's this certain type of statist that paints himself as a cynical, hard-nosed realist. And they're cynical, hard-nosed realists. And yet they believe that the state can keep society regular, by some standard of regular, to regulate, because they believe that the people with good intentions will not only win out over the people with bad intentions, despite all the disadvantages stated before, but that their good intentions will accurately calculate the demands of society, and this is to be done, at least in part, above the market. Now, I believe in regulation. I'm a big fan of regulation, but regulation can only come from within the market because you can't calculate, right? And so you can only come up with laws and regulations via the interactions of consumers, right? And that's just a very general way of saying it. A lot of people say, well, that's really dangerous. No, it's not, and I explain why not in my book. But anyway. So where did the cynicism go? Where did the realism go? Where did the hard-nosed realism go? Well, no, as soon as you talk about the state, these realists, these skeptics completely shut down and block out reasoning that is kindergarten obvious. Unfortunately, these hard-nosed realists, these Budweiser National Socialists, or BNSs for short, have a bunch of empiricism to fall back on. Right? They have... and so I'll link to a debunking of the meatpacking myth, right? And meatpacking myth. Meatpackers were regulated, and I'm not going to get into that. It's pretty bad. And the robber baron myth, right? Land grants, they're being broken up by a bunch of trust busters beforehand, right? And that's where the term trust buster came from. It was then Teddy Roosevelt then co-opted that title. or was co-opted for him. But the term trust buster had existed prior to Teddy Roosevelt's legislation that favored trusts, and the Sherman Antitrust Act, which greatly helped trusts. And perhaps it would be important to make a regulation headquarters to either debunk or link to debunkings of this regulation mythology that just will not die.